a homeless 14-year-old boy spent his last $3 on a crippled horse that the entire auction house wanted dead. 6 months later, a billionaire offered him $2 million, and the two words Marcus spoke in response would change both their lives forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The auction house in rural Kentucky was filled with the sharp smell of sawdust and the low murmur of voices as buyers gathered along the metal railings, their eyes scanning the parade of horses being led through the arena. It was a Saturday morning in early autumn, the kind of crisp day when breath hung in the air and fortunes could change with the bang of an auctioneer's gavel. Among the crowd stood men in pristine cowboy hats, their boots polished and their wallets thick with cash, ready to bid on the finest stock the region had to offer. They came for champions, for horses with strong legs and proud lineages, animals that could race or work or simply stand as symbols of their owner's wealth. What none of them expected was that the most valuable creature to pass through that arena would be the one they all dismissed without a second glance. His name was Marcus, though most people in town simply called him the boy who lived under the bridge. At 14 years old, he had already seen more hardship than most experience in a lifetime. His mother had passed away when he was 8, leaving him in the care of a father who battled demons that lived at the bottom of whiskey bottles. By the time Marcus turned 12, his father had vanished entirely, leaving nothing behind but debts and an empty apartment that the landlord quickly reclaimed. With no relatives willing to take him in, and a fear of the foster system that sent shivers down his spine, Marcus had learned to survive on his own. He slept in abandoned buildings when the weather turned cruel, and beneath the old stone bridge by the creek when summer made the nights bearable. He worked odd jobs when he could find them, sweeping floors at the feed store, helping elderly Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries, collecting bottles and cans that others discarded without thought. That particular morning, Marcus had wandered to the auction house not to buy anything, for he had only 3 crumpled dollar bills hidden in the pocket of his worn flannel shirt, money he had earned helping load hay bales the previous week. He came because the auction house was warm, because sometimes the workers would give him a sandwich if he helped to sweep up after the sales, and because he loved horses with a passion that burned bright despite all the darkness in his life. His mother had loved horses too. Before she got sick, she used to take him to the stables on the outskirts of town, where she worked grooming and feeding the animals. She would lift him onto their backs and let him feel the power and grace beneath him, and in those moments, Marcus felt like he could fly. After she died, those memories became his most treasured possessions, more valuable than any material thing he had ever owned. The auction was winding down when they brought out the last horse of the day. A ripple of disappointment passed through the crowd as the animal limped into the arena, its right front leg wrapped in a dirty bandage that did little to hide the severity of its injury. The horse was a chestnut mare with a white star on her forehead, and despite her condition, there was something magnificent about her. Her coat, though dull from neglect, hinted at a rich copper shine waiting to emerge. Her eyes, large and dark, held a mixture of pain and dignity that made Marcus's heart ache. She moved slowly, each step clearly causing her discomfort, yet she held her head as high as she could manage, refusing to surrender her pride entirely. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his enthusiasm notably diminished. "This here is lot number 47, he announced without much conviction. 5-year-old mare, name of Starlight. Got herself a leg injury. Seller says it happened during transport. Starting bid is $50. The silence that followed was deafening. The men in their expensive hats exchanged glances and shook their heads. One of them laughed quietly and muttered something about sending her straight to the glue factory. Another checked his watch impatiently, clearly eager to leave now that the promising stock had all been sold. The auctioneer tried again, lowering his voice. $40 then. Come on, folks, she just needs some care. Still nothing. 30, 20. The numbers fell like stones into still water, creating no ripples of interest whatsoever. Marcus stood frozen at the railing, his eyes locked on Starlight. He watched the way she held herself, despite her pain, the way her ears flickered at the cruel words being spoken about her, almost as if she understood. He thought of his mother, of how she had always said that every creature deserved love and dignity, that the ones who were broken needed it most of all. His hand moved instinctively to his pocket, where those $3 waited. It was everything he had. It was meant for food, for the bus fare to the next town where he heard there might be work at a farm. It was his survival for the next week. But looking at Starlight, at the resignation beginning to creep into her beautiful dark eyes, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The auctioneer sighed heavily. $10. Anyone? 5? This mare needs to go somewhere, folks. If nobody wants her, you know what happens next. His words hung in the air like a threat, and Marcus understood perfectly. A horse that could not be sold, especially one that was injured and would cost money to rehabilitate, faced only one fate. The thought made his stomach turn. Before he knew what he was doing, before his mind could talk his heart out of it, Marcus raised his hand. The movement drew surprised looks from the men around him, their eyes traveling over his torn jeans, his dirt-smudged face, his flannel shirt that was 2 sizes too big and missing half its buttons. A few of them smirked. One openly laughed. "I have $3, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. $3. The auctioneer stared at him for a long moment, his expression cycling through confusion, pity, and finally something that might have been respect. "Son," he said slowly, $3 will not even cover the paperwork." But Marcus did not lower his hand. He met the auctioneer's gaze with a determination that seemed far beyond his years. "It is everything I have, sir, but I promise I will take care of her." The arena fell completely silent. Even the men who had laughed moments before found themselves watching this ragged boy with something approaching curiosity. The auctioneer removed his hat and scratched his head, clearly unsure how to proceed. In all his years of running these sales, he had never encountered anything quite like this. A homeless boy offering $3 for a lame horse that nobody wanted. It was absurd, and yet there was something in the boy's eyes that gave him pause. He had seen wealthy men bid thousands on horses they would neglect within months, men who viewed these magnificent animals as nothing more than status symbols or investments. But this boy, this ragged child with dirt under his fingernails and holes in his shoes, looked at that injured mare the way a person looks at family. The crowd began to murmur impatiently. Someone called out that they should just end the auction and move on with their day. Another suggested that the boy was wasting everyone's time with his ridiculous offer. But before the auctioneer could respond, an older man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. He wore simple clothes, work boots caked with mud, and a faded cap that had seen better days. His name was Samuel Crawford, and he had been coming to these auctions for 40 years, first as a buyer, then as a seller, and now simply as an observer who enjoyed watching the proceedings. Samuel approached the auctioneer's podium and spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I will cover the difference," he announced, pulling a worn leather wallet from his back pocket. "Whatever the minimum is to make this sale official, I will pay it. Consider it a gift to the boy." The auctioneer's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded slowly. "That would be another $47 to meet our minimum processing fee, sir." Samuel counted out the bills without hesitation and placed them on the podium. He then turned to look at Marcus, his weathered face softening into a gentle smile. "She is yours now, son. Take good care of her." Marcus stood speechless, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. He wanted to thank the old man, to express the overwhelming gratitude that was flooding through him, but the words seemed trapped somewhere between his heart and his throat. Samuel seemed to understand. He walked over to Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I knew your mother," he said quietly, so only Marcus could hear. "She used to work at my neighbor's stable years ago. Finest horse person I ever met. Something tells me you have her gift." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before Marcus could find his voice. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and instructions. The auction house staff, perhaps moved by what they had witnessed or simply eager to close out the day, helped Marcus navigate the process of officially taking ownership of Starlight. They gave him a rope halter and a lead line, explained the basics of the mare's condition as they understood it, and pointed him toward the exit. One of the workers, a young woman with kind eyes, pressed a small bag into his hands before he left. "There is some grain in there," she whispered, "and a few apples. It is not much, but it should help for a day or two." Marcus thanked her with tears threatening to spill from his eyes. Leading Starlight out of the auction house and into the afternoon sunlight was one of the most terrifying and exhilarating experiences of Marcus's young life. The mare walked slowly beside him, her injured leg causing her to limp noticeably with each step. But she followed him without resistance, as if she understood that this boy with the gentle hands and soft voice was her only chance at survival. They made their way down the dusty road that led away from town, Marcus talking to her constantly in low, soothing tones. "I know you are hurting, girl," he told her. "I know things have been bad, but I promise you, I am going to help you get better. We are going to help each other." The place Marcus had in mind was an abandoned farm about 3 miles outside of town. He had discovered it months ago during one of his wanderings, a property that had been foreclosed and left to decay. The house was beyond saving, its roof collapsed and its walls claimed by vines and weather. But the old barn still stood, its structure sound despite years of neglect. More importantly, there was a small pasture behind it with a creek running through, providing fresh water and enough grass to sustain a single horse. It was not much, but it was something. It was a chance. The walk took nearly 2 hours, with Marcus stopping frequently to let Starlight rest her injured leg. Each time they paused, he would crouch down and examine the bandage, noting with concern how dirty and loose it had become. He knew nothing about veterinary medicine, but common sense told him that the wound needed proper cleaning and fresh wrapping. As they walked, he made a mental list of everything he would need: clean cloth for bandages, some kind of antiseptic if he could find it, more food for both of them. The list grew longer with each step, and his $3 now spent offered no solutions. When they finally reached the abandoned farm, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus led Starlight into the old barn, relieved to find it much as he remembered. There were a few old stalls, their wooden walls still intact, and a hayloft above that still held scattered remnants of straw from years past. He guided the mare into the largest stall, gathered what clean straw he could find, and spread it on the ground to create a soft bed for her. Starlight lowered herself down with a heavy sigh, her body clearly exhausted from the journey and the pain. Marcus sat beside her in the gathering darkness, his back against the wooden wall of the stall, watching as her breathing gradually slowed into the rhythm of sleep. He had no idea how he was going to care for this horse. He had no money, no supplies, no real knowledge of how to treat her injury. All he had was determination and a promise he had made to both himself and this beautiful broken creature. As the first stars appeared through the gaps in the barn roof, Marcus allowed himself to close his eyes. Tomorrow he would figure out the rest. Tomorrow the real work would begin. For now, in this moment, he was not alone anymore. Neither was she. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. The first rays of dawn crept through the cracks in the barn walls, casting thin lines of golden light across the straw-covered floor. Marcus woke with a start, momentarily confused about where he was, until the soft sound of breathing beside him brought everything back. Starlight lay in the same position she had fallen asleep in, her large dark eyes now open and watching him with an expression that seemed almost curious. Marcus stretched his stiff muscles and crawled closer to her, reaching out slowly to stroke the white star on her forehead. "Good morning, girl," he whispered. "How are you feeling today?" The mare responded with a soft nickering sound that Marcus chose to interpret as hopeful. His first task was to examine her injured leg more closely. In the light of day, he could see that the bandage was not just dirty, but crusted with dried blood and other fluids that had seeped through the fabric. The smell coming from beneath it made his stomach turn with worry. He knew enough to understand that infection was a serious threat, one that could claim a horse's life if left untreated. With gentle hands, he began to unwrap the bandage, speaking softly to Starlight throughout the process to keep her calm. What he found beneath made his heart sink. The wound was deep and jagged, running along the front of her cannon bone, and the flesh around it was swollen and hot to the touch. This was beyond anything he could treat with simple cleaning and fresh wrapping. Marcus sat back on his heels, fighting the despair that threatened to overwhelm him. He had promised to take care of this horse, but how could he possibly do that when he had nothing? No money for a veterinarian, no medicine, no proper supplies. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his situation, the hopelessness that came with being 14 years old, alone in the world, and responsible for a life that depended entirely on him. Then he thought of his mother, of the way she would roll up her sleeves and tackle any problem with determination and creativity. She would not give up. She would find a way, and so would he. He left Starlight in the barn with a promise to return quickly and set off toward town. His plan was simple if not elegant. He would find work, any work, and earn enough money to buy the supplies he needed. The feed store opened early, and the owner, Mr. Henderson, had given him odd jobs before. Marcus walked the 3 miles with purpose in his step, arriving just as the old man was unlocking the front door. Mr. Henderson listened to his request with a thoughtful expression, stroking his gray beard as Marcus explained that he needed to earn some money urgently. "There is a delivery that needs to go out to the Whitmore Ranch," Mr. Henderson finally said. "It is a lot of heavy lifting, and my usual boy called in sick. You do that for me, and I will give you $20. $20 felt like a fortune. Marcus threw himself into the work with everything he had, loading 50-pound bags of feed onto the delivery truck, then unloading them again at the ranch, while the sun climbed higher and the temperature rose. His muscles screamed in protest, and his empty stomach growled with hunger, but he did not stop until the last bag was stacked neatly in the Whitmore storage shed. True to his word, Mr. Henderson paid him the $20, along with a sandwich that Marcus devoured in 4 bites. But the old man also did something unexpected. He handed Marcus a small bottle of veterinary antiseptic and a roll of clean bandaging material. "Heard about what you did at the auction yesterday," he said gruffly. "Word travels fast in a small town. This should help with that mare's leg. And if you need more work, you know where to find me." Armed with his supplies, Marcus hurried back to the abandoned farm. He found Starlight exactly where he had left her, though she raised her head eagerly at the sound of his footsteps. Over the next hour, he carefully cleaned her wound, wincing in sympathy as she flinched from the sting of the antiseptic. He talked to her throughout the process, telling her about his day, about Mr. Henderson's kindness, about the sandwich that had been the best thing he had eaten in weeks. By the time he finished wrapping her leg in fresh bandages, the sun was beginning to set once again. He used some of his remaining money to buy a small bag of grain from the feed store on his way back, and he sat with Starlight as she ate, feeling a small spark of hope ignite in his chest. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Each morning, Marcus would wake before dawn, change Starlight's bandages, and make sure she had water from the creek and whatever food he could provide. Then he would walk to town and find whatever work was available. He swept floors at the hardware store. He helped Mrs. Patterson with her garden. He collected scrap metal and sold it to the recycling center on the edge of town. Every cent he earned went toward Starlight's care, toward grain and hay and more medical supplies. He ate only what others gave him, accepting sandwiches and apples and leftover meals with quiet gratitude. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Starlight began to improve. The swelling in her leg decreased. The wound started to close, pink healthy tissue replacing the angry red inflammation. She began to stand for longer periods, then to walk short distances around the barn without limping as severely. And with each small improvement, the bond between horse and boy grew stronger. Starlight would whinny when she heard Marcus approaching, would press her head against his chest when he sat beside her, would follow him with her eyes whenever he moved around the barn. For Marcus, who had been alone for so long, this connection was like water to a man dying of thirst. He had found something to care for, something that needed him, and that purpose gave his life meaning it had lacked since his mother's death. 3 weeks passed, and the transformation in Starlight was nothing short of remarkable. The wound on her leg had closed completely, leaving behind a scar that would fade with time but never fully disappear. She was walking without a limp now, her steps growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. Her coat, once dull and neglected, had begun to develop a rich copper shine that caught the light and made her look like a creature from a storybook. But more than the physical changes, there was something in her spirit that had shifted. The resignation that had dulled her eyes at the auction was gone, replaced by a brightness that seemed to grow every time Marcus appeared at the barn door. Marcus had established a routine that consumed his every waking hour. Mornings were for Starlight, for grooming her coat until it gleamed, for checking her leg and applying the ointment that Dr. Sarah Mitchell had given him during her unexpected visit 2 weeks prior. The veterinarian had heard about the boy and his horse from Mr. Henderson and had driven out to the abandoned farm to see for herself. What she found had impressed her deeply. The wound was healing beautifully, better than she would have expected given the circumstances, and the mare's overall condition showed clear signs of dedicated care. She had left Marcus with a supply of medication and ointment, refusing payment despite his protests. "Just keep doing what you are doing," she had told him with a warm smile. "You have good instincts with horses. That mare is lucky you found her." After caring for Starlight, Marcus would spend the rest of his day working. His reputation had spread through the small town, and now people sought him out specifically when they needed help with physical labor. He was reliable, hardworking, and honest, qualities that were increasingly rare and therefore valued. The money he earned went primarily towards Starlight's food and care, with whatever small amount remained going toward his own survival. He had found an old sleeping bag in the barn's hayloft, left behind by some previous occupant, and this served as his bed. For food, he relied on the generosity of those he worked for, supplemented by the occasional meal at the church soup kitchen in town. It was not an easy life, but it was a life with purpose, and that made all the difference. As Starlight's strength returned, Marcus began to work with her in more active ways. He had no formal training in horsemanship, but he had inherited his mother's natural instinct for understanding these animals. He started simply, leading her around the small pasture behind the barn, letting her muscles rebuild gradually. He talked to her constantly, narrating his movements and intentions before he made them, building a language of trust between them. When he placed his hand on her back, she did not flinch. When he asked her to move, she responded with a willingness that seemed almost eager. It was as if she understood that everything he did was for her benefit, that this boy who had saved her from death would never ask her to do anything that would cause her harm. One afternoon, Marcus decided it was time to see if Starlight could carry weight again. He had no saddle, no proper equipment of any kind, so he improvised with a folded blanket from his sleeping bag. He placed it gently on her back, watching her reaction carefully. She turned her head to look at him, her large eyes calm and trusting. Taking a deep breath, Marcus gripped her mane and pulled himself onto her back. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Starlight took a step forward, then another, carrying him across the pasture as if he weighed nothing at all. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as they walked together, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had accomplished. This horse that had been destined for slaughter was now carrying him, not because she was forced to, but because she chose to. The bond between them had become something profound, something neither of them had known they needed until they found it in each other. Word of the boy and his miraculous horse continued to spread beyond the boundaries of their small town. Dr. Mitchell mentioned them to her colleagues at a veterinary conference. Mr. Henderson told the story to every customer who came into his store. Mrs. Patterson shared it with her book club, and they shared it with their families, who shared it with their friends. The tale grew and evolved as tales do, but the core remained the same. A homeless boy with nothing but $3 and a heart full of love had saved a horse that everyone else had given up on. It was the kind of story that people needed to hear, a reminder that kindness and determination could still triumph in a world that often seemed cruel and indifferent. It was during the 6th week of their partnership that Marcus first noticed something extraordinary about Starlight's abilities. He had been riding her around the pasture, building her stamina and confidence, when he decided on impulse to ask her for more speed. He leaned forward, pressed his legs gently against her sides, and whispered a single word: "Go." What happened next took his breath away. Starlight launched forward with an acceleration that pinned Marcus against her back, her legs moving in a blur of power and grace that seemed impossible for an animal who had been near death just weeks before. The wind whipped through his hair as they flew across the field, and Marcus found himself laughing with pure joy. When they finally slowed and stopped, both of them breathing hard, he slid off her back and wrapped his arms around her neck. "You are amazing," he told her. "Do you know that? You are the most amazing horse in the world." What Marcus did not know, what he could not have known, was that Starlight's bloodlines connected her to some of the greatest racehorses in history. The people who had abandoned her at the auction had no idea what they possessed, seeing only an injured animal that had become a liability. But the speed that Starlight had just demonstrated was not ordinary. It was the kind of speed that won championships, the kind that horse racing experts spent their careers searching for. And very soon, the right people would begin to take notice. The discovery of Starlight's extraordinary speed changed everything, though Marcus did not immediately understand how profoundly his life was about to shift. He continued his daily routine of caring for her, working odd jobs in town, and spending every spare moment strengthening their bond. But now their training sessions included sprints across the pasture, each one revealing more of the raw talent that had been hidden beneath her injured exterior. Starlight seemed to relish these moments of freedom, her entire being coming alive when she was allowed to run. Her muscles rippled beneath her gleaming coat, her mane streamed behind her like a copper banner, and her hooves barely seemed to touch the ground as she ate up distance with impossible ease. Dr. Mitchell was the first outsider to witness Starlight's transformation. She had returned to check on the mare's leg, a follow-up visit she had been planning for weeks. When she arrived at the abandoned farm, Marcus was just finishing a training session, slowing Starlight from a full gallop to a gentle walk. The veterinarian stood frozen by her truck, her jaw hanging open in disbelief. She had seen countless horses in her career, had treated champions and working animals alike, but she had never seen anything move quite like this mare. "That horse," she said slowly when Marcus approached, "should not be able to move like that. Not after the injury she had. Not after only 6 weeks of recovery. It is not possible." Marcus simply shrugged, not fully grasping what she meant. "She wanted to run," he explained, "so I let her run. She seems happier when she can go fast." Dr. Mitchell shook her head, still staring at Starlight with an expression of wonder. "Son, that mare is not just fast, she is extraordinarily fast. I have worked with racehorses my entire career, and I can count on one hand the number of animals I have seen with that kind of natural ability. Do you have any idea who owned her before the auction?" Marcus told her everything he knew, which was almost nothing. Just that her name was Starlight, she was 5 years old, and she had been injured during transport. The rest was a mystery. That night, after Dr. Mitchell left with promises to make some inquiries about Starlight's origins, Marcus sat with his horse under the stars. The autumn air had grown colder, and he had wrapped himself in his sleeping bag while Starlight stood beside him, occasionally lowering her head to nuzzle his hair. He thought about what the veterinarian had said, about speed and ability in racehorses. He had never considered entering Starlight in any kind of competition. The idea of exploiting her talents for money felt wrong somehow, a betrayal of the pure relationship they had built. But another part of him wondered if perhaps this was an opportunity, a chance to give them both a better life. He fell asleep without reaching any conclusions, his dreams filled with images of endless green fields and the thunder of hooves. A week later, Dr. Mitchell returned with news that would set their story on an entirely new course. She had contacted colleagues in the horse racing industry, shared photos and videos she had taken during her visits, and made inquiries about Starlight's registration papers. What she discovered was astonishing. The mare's full name was Starlight's Legacy, and she was the granddaughter of a legendary racehorse who had won multiple championship titles before retiring to stud. Her bloodline was impeccable, worth a small fortune on paper alone. The people who had sold her at auction had been a struggling breeding operation that went bankrupt. They had offloaded their animals quickly and carelessly, never bothering to verify the lineage of the horses they were selling. In their haste, they had let a potential champion slip through their fingers for $3. Marcus listened to all of this with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He understood that Starlight was valuable, far more valuable than he had ever imagined. But he also understood that valuable things attracted attention, and attention could bring trouble as easily as opportunity. His fears proved justified sooner than he expected. Within days of Dr. Mitchell's discovery, strangers began appearing at the abandoned farm. Some were reporters who had heard rumors of the miracle horse and wanted interviews. Others were horse traders offering to buy Starlight for prices that made Marcus's head spin. $5,000, then 10, then 20. Each offer was higher than the last, and each one was firmly refused. The attention frightened Marcus more than it thrilled him. He had spent 2 years living in the shadows, avoiding the authorities who might put him in foster care, avoiding the questions that would reveal his homelessness. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted to know his story, wanted to shine lights into the corners of his life that he had worked so hard to keep hidden. He began avoiding town during the day, slipping in only at dawn or dusk to buy supplies. He stopped working his regular jobs, relying instead on the small savings he had accumulated. His world shrank to the boundaries of the abandoned farm, to the barn and the pasture and the creek, to the only companion he fully trusted. Starlight seemed to sense his anxiety, staying close to him during the day, positioning herself between him and any visitors who appeared. She had become fiercely protective of the boy who had saved her, responding to any perceived threat with raised ears and warning snorts. One particularly aggressive horse trader learned this the hard way when he tried to enter the barn uninvited and found himself facing a very angry mare with her teeth bared. He retreated quickly, and Marcus watched him go with a grim satisfaction. They would protect each other, he and Starlight. They had survived this long by relying on no one but themselves, and they would continue to survive no matter what attention their story attracted. But fate had other plans. Among all the strangers who had heard the tale of the $3 horse and the homeless boy, there was one who listened with more than casual interest. His name was Jonathan Whitfield, and he was one of the wealthiest men in America. He had built his fortune in technology, sold his company for billions, and retired early to pursue his true passion, breeding and racing championship horses. When he heard about Starlight's legacy, he knew immediately that he had to see her for himself. What he discovered when he finally arrived at that crumbling farm would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone involved in ways none of them could have predicted. The black SUV that pulled up to the abandoned farm was unlike any vehicle Marcus had ever seen. It gleamed in the morning sunlight, its windows tinted so dark that nothing inside it was visible. For a moment, Marcus considered hiding in the barn, pretending he was not there, waiting for this latest intruder to give up and leave. But something about this arrival felt different from the others. There was no camera crew following behind, no aggressive energy radiating from the vehicle. When the driver's door opened and a man stepped out, Marcus found himself frozen in place, watching with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Jonathan Whitfield was not what Marcus had expected a billionaire to look like. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt, not unlike the one Marcus himself owned. And his boots were scuffed with the kind of wear that came from actual use rather than fashion. His hair was gray at the temples, his face lined with the evidence of years spent outdoors. When he smiled at Marcus, there was genuine warmth in his expression, none of the predatory calculation that had characterized the other buyers who had come before. "Hello there," he called out, keeping his distance in a way that suggested he understood the importance of not appearing threatening. "My name is Jonathan. I was hoping I might meet the famous Starlight and her even more famous owner." Marcus did not respond immediately. He had learned that silence was often his best defense, a way of forcing others to reveal their true intentions before he committed to anything. Jonathan seemed to understand this too. He leaned against his vehicle and waited, patient as a man who had nowhere else to be. The minutes stretched between them, filled only by the sound of birds singing in the nearby trees and the distant gurgle of the creek. Finally, Marcus spoke. "She is not for sale. I have told everyone who comes here the same thing. She is not for sale at any price." Jonathan nodded slowly, as if this answer was exactly what he had expected and hoped to hear. "I did not come here to buy your horse," he said gently. "I came here because your story reminded me of someone I used to know, someone very important to me." He paused, his eyes growing distant with memory. "When I was about your age, I was in a situation not so different from yours. No family to speak of, no home, no money. The only friend I had in the world was a dog I found behind a restaurant, eating scraps from the garbage. Everyone told me I was foolish for keeping him, that I could barely feed myself, let alone a pet. But that dog gave me a reason to keep going when I had none. He was my family when I had no family. I suspect you understand exactly what I mean." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a defensive wall beginning to crumble. He did understand. He understood completely. Without planning to, he found himself walking toward Jonathan, closing the distance between them. Starlight followed, her steps careful but curious, her large eyes studying this stranger who spoke with such unexpected kindness. Jonathan watched her approach with an expression of genuine reverence, the look of a man who recognized excellence when he saw it. "She is magnificent," he breathed, "even more beautiful than the photograph suggested. You have done an incredible job with her rehabilitation. Dr. Mitchell told me about the condition she was in when you found her. What you accomplished borders on miraculous." For the next hour, Jonathan simply talked with Marcus. He asked questions about Starlight's training, about Marcus's daily routine, about his hopes and dreams for the future. He listened with genuine interest, never interrupting, never steering the conversation toward any agenda. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he had not with anyone since his mother died. He told Jonathan about sleeping under the bridge, about the fear that had become his constant companion, about the day at the auction when everything changed. Jonathan absorbed it all with an empathy that felt completely authentic. When Marcus finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted from the unexpected confession, Jonathan spoke again. "I would like to make you an offer," he said carefully. "Not for Starlight. She belongs with you, and anyone can see that separating you two would be a tragedy for both. My offer is for something else entirely." He explained that he owned a horse farm in the countryside about 50 miles away. It was a sprawling property with state-of-the-art facilities, professional trainers, and everything a horse and rider could possibly need. He was looking for someone to help manage the rehabilitation program for injured horses, animals that had been discarded by the racing industry when they were no longer profitable. The work would involve exactly what Marcus had been doing with Starlight, providing care and patience and love to creatures that others had given up on. "There is a cottage on the property," Jonathan continued. "Small but comfortable. It would be yours, along with a stable for Starlight. You would have a salary, health insurance, access to education if you wanted. Most importantly, you would have a legal guardian. I have already spoken with my lawyers about the process for becoming your foster parent. It would allow you to stop running, to stop hiding. It would give you a real home." Marcus stared at him, unable to process what he was hearing. This stranger was offering him everything he had ever wanted, everything he had been too afraid to even hope for: a home, a family, a future. The tears came before he could stop them, streaming down his face in silent rivers. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why would you do this for me?" Jonathan smiled, and there was something profound in his expression, a wisdom earned through years of both success and suffering. "Because 40 years ago, someone did the same thing for me. They saw a homeless boy with nothing but a stray dog, and they chose to invest in his potential. Everything I have built, everything I have accomplished started with that single act of kindness." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I believe in paying things forward. And I believe that you and Starlight have something special, something that deserves a chance to flourish. Let me give you that chance." Marcus looked at Starlight, who had positioned herself beside him as she always did when he was emotional. Her large dark eyes met his, and in them he saw trust, love, and something that might have been encouragement. He thought about his mother, about what she would want for him, about the dreams she had shared before she got sick. Then he turned back to Jonathan and spoke 2 words that would change his life forever. "I accept." The transition from homelessness to stability happened faster than Marcus could have imagined. Within 2 weeks of their first meeting, Jonathan had navigated the complex legal process required to become Marcus's official guardian. Social workers visited, paperwork was filed, and interviews were conducted. Through it all, Jonathan remained calm and reassuring, handling every obstacle with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to solving problems. Marcus was terrified throughout the process, convinced at every turn that something would go wrong, that this dream would evaporate like so many others before it. But Jonathan never wavered, and slowly Marcus began to believe that perhaps this time, things really would be different. The day they moved to Whitfield Farm was one Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. He rode in the passenger seat of Jonathan's SUV, while a professional horse transport followed behind, carrying Starlight in climate-controlled comfort. As they turned onto the long driveway that led to the property, Marcus pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. The farm stretched before them in rolling hills of green, dotted with pristine white fences that marked individual paddocks. Horses grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun, their coats gleaming with health and careful grooming. In the distance, a massive barn complex rose against the sky, more impressive than any building Marcus had ever entered. The cottage Jonathan had mentioned turned out to be far more than the small dwelling Marcus had pictured. It was a proper house with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, and a bathroom with a tub deep enough to actually soak in. Marcus wandered through the rooms in a daze, touching the furniture as if to confirm it was real. There were sheets on the bed, towels in the bathroom, food in the refrigerator. The closet contained new clothes in his size, and a desk in the corner held school supplies and a brand new laptop computer. When Jonathan explained that a tutor would be coming 3 times a week to help Marcus catch up on the education he had missed, Marcus had to sit down to keep from falling over. But the true highlight of the property was the stable attached to the cottage, a private space designed specifically for Starlight. It featured a large box stall with rubber matting on the floor, automatic waterers, and a direct exit to a private paddock where she could graze and run whenever she pleased. When the transport van doors opened and Starlight stepped out onto the gravel driveway, she lifted her head and surveyed her new domain with an almost regal bearing. Marcus led her to the paddock gate and released her, watching as she trotted across the grass, then broke into a gallop that carried her in wide circles around the perimeter. She was showing off, he realized with a grin. She wanted everyone to see what she could do. The first few months at Whitfield Farm were a period of adjustment and discovery. Marcus threw himself into learning everything he could about horse care and training, studying with the same dedication that had saved Starlight's life. The professional trainers on staff were initially skeptical of the teenage boy who had arrived with such an extraordinary horse, but their doubts evaporated quickly as they witnessed his natural abilities. He had an instinct for understanding what horses needed, a gift for communicating with them that could not be taught. Dr. Mitchell, who visited regularly to check on Starlight's continued recovery, told Jonathan that she had never seen anyone with such raw talent. "The boy is a prodigy," she said simply. "With proper training, there is no limit to what he could accomplish." Starlight flourished in her new environment. With access to proper nutrition, professional veterinary care, and unlimited space to run, she transformed from a recovered patient into an athlete of breathtaking ability. Jonathan hired a racing consultant to evaluate her potential, a grizzled former jockey named Pete Rodriguez, who had spent 40 years in the industry. Pete watched Starlight run through her paces with an expression of increasing disbelief, his stopwatch trembling slightly in his weathered hands. When she finished, he turned to Jonathan with eyes wide as dinner plates. "That mare just ran a quarter-mile faster than any horse I have ever timed outside of a professional racetrack. She is not just good, she is once-in-a-generation good." The news spread quickly through the horse racing community. Starlight's legacy, the $3 auction horse, had become the most talked-about prospect in years. Reporters who had initially covered the heartwarming story of a homeless boy and his rescue horse now returned to chronicle her athletic achievements. Sports networks sent camera crews to film her training sessions. Racing publications featured her on their covers with headlines that proclaimed her a potential champion. Through it all, Marcus remained her primary handler, the only person she fully trusted, the boy who had saved her life when everyone else had written her off. With the attention came the offers. They started modestly, at least by racing industry standards, with trainers and owners offering $50,000 for the right to purchase Starlight. When those offers were declined, the numbers climbed rapidly. 100,000, 250,000, $500,000. Each time Marcus refused without hesitation, and Jonathan supported his decision completely. "The mare belongs to Marcus," he told everyone who inquired. "She is not for sale at any price." Some people accepted this gracefully. Others could not fathom why anyone would turn down such staggering sums for an animal that had cost $3. Among those who could not accept the refusals was a man named Victor Harrington, the owner of the largest racing stable on the East Coast. Victor was accustomed to getting what he wanted, and what he wanted more than anything was Starlight's legacy. He had built his empire by identifying exceptional horses and acquiring them by any means necessary. His methods were not always ethical, but they were effective, and his trophy case overflowed with championship hardware. When he first saw footage of Starlight running, he knew immediately that she was special. When his initial offers were rejected, he became obsessed. Victor Harrington was not a man who accepted no for an answer, and he had already begun formulating a plan to make Starlight his own, regardless of what Marcus or Jonathan wanted. Victor Harrington arrived at Whitfield Farm on a Tuesday morning, driving a silver Rolls-Royce that cost more than most houses in the county. He stepped out wearing a tailored suit that probably exceeded Marcus's entire wardrobe in value, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile as polished as his Italian leather shoes. Jonathan was away on business that day, a fact that Victor had carefully confirmed before making his visit. He wanted to speak with the boy alone, convinced that a teenager could be more easily manipulated than the experienced billionaire who had become his guardian. It was a calculation that revealed how profoundly Victor misunderstood the young man he was about to confront. Marcus was in the training paddock with Starlight when the gleaming vehicle pulled up the driveway. He watched it approach with immediate suspicion, his instincts honed by years of surviving on the streets screaming that this visitor meant trouble. Starlight sensed his tension and moved closer, positioning herself slightly in front of him in the protective stance she had adopted whenever she perceived a threat. When Victor emerged and began walking toward them with that practiced smile, Marcus felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. He recognized the type instantly. This was a man who saw everything in terms of transactions, who believed that enough money could purchase anything and anyone. "Good morning," Victor called out as he approached the fence. "You must be Marcus. I have heard so much about you and your remarkable horse. My name is Victor Harrington. Perhaps you have heard of me." Marcus had indeed heard of him. The trainers at Whitfield Farm spoke of Victor in hushed tones, sharing stories of his ruthless business practices, of horses that had been pushed too hard and discarded when they broke it down, of people who had opposed him and found their careers mysteriously destroyed. He was the cautionary tale they told newcomers, a reminder that the racing industry had its share of predators alongside its passionate enthusiasts. "I know who you are," Marcus replied, his voice flat, "and I know what you want. The answer is no." Victor's smile did not waver, though something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Now let us not be hasty. You have not even heard my offer yet. I am prepared to pay $2 million for Starlight's legacy. $2 million. He let the number hang in the air, clearly expecting it to have an impact. "Do you understand what that kind of money could mean for you? College education, a house of your own, financial security for life. All you have to do is sign her over to me." Marcus stared at him with an expression that would have been unnerving coming from someone twice his age. It was the look of someone who had faced genuine hardship, who had learned to see through pretense and manipulation. 2 years of homelessness had stripped away any naivety he might have possessed. "Mr. Harrington," he said slowly, "I slept under a bridge for 8 months. I ate from garbage cans. I watched my mother die when I was 8 years old and my father drink himself into oblivion before abandoning me. You think your money impresses me. You think I can be bought. But everything I have that matters came to me without money. Starlight is not for sale." The mask of pleasantness finally slipped from Victor's face, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "You are making a mistake, boy. A serious mistake. I always get what I want, one way or another. If you will not sell her to me willingly, there are other ways." His voice dropped to something approaching a threat. "That guardian of yours might not always be around to protect you. Accidents happen on horse farms, papers get lost, legal complications arise. A smart young man would take my very generous offer while it is still on the table." Starlight, who had been watching the exchange with increasing agitation, suddenly lunged toward the fence with a furious whinny. Her teeth snapped at the air inches from Victor's face, and he stumbled backward with a yelp of surprise, his expensive suit collecting dust as he nearly fell. Marcus did not move to restrain her. If anything, there was a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. "I think you should leave now," he said calmly, "and I would not come back if I were you. Starlight does not like you. Neither do I." Victor retreated to his Rolls-Royce, his composure shattered, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. That evening, Marcus told Jonathan everything about the visit. The older man listened with growing concern, his expression darkening as Marcus recounted Victor's veiled threats. "This is serious," Jonathan said when the story was finished. "Victor Harrington is not someone to take lightly. He has connections everywhere, lawyers on retainer, and absolutely no scruples about using dirty tactics to get what he wants. We need to be very careful going forward." He made some phone calls that night, alerting his security team, consulting with his attorneys, and reaching out to contacts in the racing industry who might provide advance warning if Victor began moving against them. The next few weeks passed tensely. Nothing overt happened, but there were small, unsettling incidents that suggested they were being watched. Unfamiliar vehicles drove slowly past the farm entrance. A photographer was spotted taking pictures from the public road. One of the stable hands reported being approached by a stranger who asked questions about Starlight's training schedule and security arrangements. Jonathan responded by increasing security measures, installing additional cameras, and hiring overnight guards to patrol the property. Marcus, meanwhile, rarely let Starlight out of his sight, sleeping in her stable on nights when his anxiety grew too strong. It was during this period of heightened vigilance that the opportunity arose which would change everything. The Kentucky Classic, one of the most prestigious horse races in the country, announced that they were opening registration for their upcoming championship event. The prize purse was substantial, but more importantly, victory there would cement Starlight's legacy as one of the great horses of her generation. Jonathan raised the possibility carefully, knowing how protective Marcus was of his mare. "This could be her chance to show the world what she can do," he explained, "and it might also provide some protection. If she becomes a public champion, beloved by racing fans everywhere, it becomes much harder for someone like Victor to move against her without consequences." Marcus considered the proposal for 3 days before giving his answer. He consulted with Starlight in the way he always did, sitting in her stable and talking through his thoughts while she listened with those intelligent dark eyes. In the end, it was she who seemed to make the decision, nudging his shoulder with her muzzle and tossing her head toward the training track, as if to say she was ready. "We will do it," Marcus told Jonathan that evening. "We will enter the Kentucky Classic. We will show everyone what my $3 horse can do." The 3 months leading up to the Kentucky Classic were the most intense of Marcus's young life. Every day began before dawn with training sessions that pushed both him and Starlight to their limits. Jonathan had hired the best coach in the industry, a legendary trainer named Eleanor Hayes, who had guided 7 horses to championship victories over her 40-year career. Eleanor was demanding, precise, and utterly uncompromising in her standards. She worked with Marcus on every aspect of racing, from understanding track conditions to reading other horses during a race to knowing exactly when to ask Starlight for her final burst of speed. There were moments when Marcus felt overwhelmed by everything he needed to learn, but Eleanor never let him doubt himself. "You have something that cannot be taught," she told him one evening after a particularly grueling session. "You have a connection with that mare that I have only seen a handful of times in my entire career. Trust it, it will not fail you." Starlight responded to the rigorous training with an enthusiasm that amazed everyone who watched her. She seemed to understand that something important was coming, that all this preparation had a purpose beyond their daily routines. Her times improved steadily, shaving fractions of seconds that represented the difference between good horses and great ones. Pete Rodriguez, the consultant who had first recognized her potential, visited regularly to track her progress. By the end of the second month, he declared that she was ready. More than ready, actually. "She is going to win," he told Jonathan with absolute confidence. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." The news of Starlight's legacy entering the Kentucky Classic spread rapidly through the racing world. The story had already captivated the public imagination, and now it was building toward a dramatic conclusion that seemed pulled from a Hollywood screenplay. News networks ran features about the homeless boy and his $3 horse. Magazines published lengthy profiles exploring their journey from that dusty auction house to the threshold of racing's greatest stage. Sponsors began reaching out, offering endorsement deals that Marcus politely declined. He did not want distractions. He did not want anything that might compromise the purity of what he and Starlight had built together. But where there was attention, Victor Harrington was never far behind. Unable to purchase Starlight directly, he had shifted his strategy to ensuring her defeat at the Kentucky Classic. He entered 3 of his own horses in the race, all of them proven competitors with experienced jockeys. He hired private investigators to study Starlight's training patterns, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. When those efforts yielded nothing useful, he grew more desperate. Rumors began circulating that he was offering substantial bribes to anyone who could sabotage the mare's preparation. Jonathan's security team intercepted 2 separate attempts to access Starlight's stable, both times by individuals who were later connected to Victor's organization. The night before the race, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, running through every scenario in his mind, every possibility of what could go wrong. Finally, he gave up on rest entirely and walked to the stable where Starlight was waiting. She was awake too, her ears perking up as he entered, her soft nicker greeting him like an old friend. Marcus sat in the corner of her stall, wrapped in a blanket, and began to talk. He told her about his mother, about the dream she had shared with him before she got sick. He told her about the years of loneliness that had followed, the fear and hunger and hopelessness that had been his constant companions. He told her how meeting her had changed everything, had given him a reason to keep fighting when he had almost given up. "You saved me," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Everyone thinks I saved you, but the truth is you saved me. I was disappearing before I found you. I was becoming nobody, but you needed me, and that made me somebody again." Starlight lowered her head and pressed it gently against his chest, holding it there as if she understood every word. They stayed that way until dawn broke, horse and boy sharing a moment of connection that transcended language or species. When the sun finally rose on the day of the Kentucky Classic, Marcus felt a peace settle over him. Whatever happened today, he knew that they had already won the only victory that truly mattered. The racecourse was overwhelming in its scale and energy. Thousands of spectators filled the grandstands, their voices creating a constant roar that vibrated through the air. Cameras were everywhere, broadcasting the event to millions of viewers around the world. The other horses in the competition were magnificent specimens, their coats gleaming, their muscles rippling with barely contained power. Victor Harrington's 3 entries were positioned strategically throughout the starting lineup, their jockeys having been given explicit instructions about how to handle Starlight during the race. "Crowd her at the turns," Victor had ordered. "Box her in. Do whatever it takes to keep her from winning." Marcus walked Starlight to the starting gate with a calm that surprised even him. The noise, the chaos, the pressure of the moment seemed to exist at a distance, unable to penetrate the bubble of focus that surrounded them. He checked her equipment one final time, ran his hand along her neck, and whispered the same words he had spoken on that first day when he raised his hand at the auction. "I believe in you." Starlight responded with a soft snort, tossing her head as if to say she was ready. When the starting gate official called for the horses to be loaded, Marcus gave her one final pat and stepped back. This was it. Everything they had worked for, everything they had survived together, had led to this moment. The gates opened with a thunderous crash, and 12 horses exploded forward in a blur of color and motion. Starlight broke cleanly, her powerful legs propelling her into the middle of the pack as they charged toward the first turn. Marcus watched from the rail, his heart pounding, his hands gripping the fence so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He could see Victor's horses moving into position, trying to surround Starlight, trying to trap her. But she was too smart, too quick, anticipating their movements and slipping through gaps before they could close. By the halfway point, she had moved into third place. By the final turn, she was second. And then, with a surge of power that drew gasps from the crowd, she began to fly. The final stretch of the Kentucky Classic seemed to unfold in slow motion for Marcus. He watched Starlight surge past the horse in first place, her legs moving with a fluid power that made the other animal look like it was standing still. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar as the $3 auction horse took the lead, pulling away from the competition with every stride. Victor Harrington's entries, despite all their training and strategic positioning, could not keep pace. They fell back one by one, their jockeys whipping desperately in a futile attempt to close the widening gap. But Starlight was running like something possessed, like a creature that had been waiting her entire life for this single moment of triumph. Marcus found himself screaming without realizing it, his voice joining the thousands of others that filled the air with celebration. Tears blurred his vision as Starlight crossed the finish line a full 3 lengths ahead of her nearest competitor, her time shattering the track record by nearly 2 seconds. It was not just a victory, it was a declaration. This horse that everyone had dismissed, that had been sold for pocket change and destined for destruction, had just proven herself the fastest in the entire country. When Marcus finally reached her at the winner's circle, pushing through the crowd of reporters and officials, Starlight lowered her head and pressed it against his chest exactly as she had done the night before. "We did it," he whispered into her mane. "We actually did it." The celebration that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Cameras flashed from every direction. Microphones were thrust toward his face. Important people whose names he did not know lined up to shake his hand and offer congratulations. Through it all, he kept one hand on Starlight's neck, drawing strength from her presence, remembering that none of this would have been possible without the bond they shared. Jonathan appeared at his side, his face beaming with pride, and wrapped him in a hug that felt genuinely paternal. "I knew you could do it," he said, "both of you. I knew from the first moment I saw you together." The prize money from the Kentucky Classic was substantial, more money than Marcus had ever imagined possessing, but the true reward came in a different form entirely. In the weeks following their victory, the Racing Commission launched an investigation into Victor Harrington's attempts to sabotage their campaign. The evidence that Jonathan's security team had gathered proved damning, revealing a pattern of corruption and intimidation that extended far beyond their particular case. Victor's racing license was revoked. His stable was shut down pending further investigation. Several of his associates faced criminal charges for attempted bribery and trespassing. The man who had threatened Marcus with such confidence found himself utterly destroyed, his empire crumbling around him, while the boy he had underestimated celebrated on the front pages of every newspaper in the country. 6 months after the Kentucky Classic, Marcus stood on the porch of his cottage watching Starlight graze in the paddock that had become her home. So much had changed since that morning at the auction house, since he had raised his hand and offered 3 crumpled dollars for a horse that nobody wanted. He had a home now, a real home with his name on the mailbox. He had a guardian who treated him like a son, who was already discussing adoption papers that would make their family official. He had an education, friends his own age, and a future that seemed bright with possibility. Most importantly, he had Starlight, the companion who had transformed his life and taught him that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. The rehabilitation program that Jonathan had originally envisioned became Marcus's primary focus in the years that followed. Using the platform that Starlight's victory had provided, they established a foundation dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating horses that had been abandoned or abused. Marcus became its spokesperson, traveling to schools and community centers to share their story, to remind people that every creature deserved a second chance. Starlight accompanied him when possible, her presence drawing crowds who wanted to meet the legendary $3 horse in person. Together they raised millions of dollars, saved hundreds of horses, and inspired countless people who were facing their own struggles. Starlight raced 2 more seasons, winning more championships than any horse in recent memory. When she finally retired, it was on her own terms, her body healthy and her spirit undiminished. She lived out her remaining years at Whitfield Farm, surrounded by the other rescued horses she had helped save, treated like the queen she had always been. Marcus visited her every single day without exception, their bond remaining as strong in her twilight years as it had been in those desperate early days. When she finally passed away at the age of 23, peacefully and in his arms, Marcus wept for hours. But even through his grief, he felt gratitude for every moment they had shared. The legacy they created together continued long after Starlight was gone. The foundation expanded to include programs for homeless youth, connecting struggling teenagers with horses that needed care, creating bonds that transformed lives just as Marcus's life had been transformed. He became living proof that circumstances do not define destiny, that a boy with nothing but $3 and a willing heart could change the world. When reporters asked him about the secret to his success, his answer was always the same. "There is no secret," he would say with a smile. "You just have to believe in something bigger than yourself. You have to love something enough to fight for it, and you can never, ever give up." Today, a bronze statue stands at the entrance of the Starlight Foundation headquarters. It depicts a young boy in torn clothes standing beside a limping horse, both of them gazing toward a horizon full of promise. The plaque beneath it reads simply, "Where others saw nothing, they found everything." Every year, thousands of visitors stop to read those words and remember the story of the homeless boy and his $3 horse. It reminds them that miracles are possible, that love can conquer circumstance, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that others have discarded. Marcus often visits the statue himself, placing his hand on the bronze mane of the horse that changed his life. "Thank you," he whispers each time. "Thank you for choosing me." If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who needs it to hear it today. Drop a comment telling me what you thought and where you are watching from around the world. And if you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. May you find your own starlight wherever life takes you.